bake. So clean that oven with Jif-Foam. Cakes can be beautiful, and ovens too, while your oven's warm. Foam on Jif-Foam. Jif-Foam foams away sticky drippings, grease, and baked-on crust. Foams and cleans your oven in a jiffy.
Gertrude, that cake looks good. Why'd you buy it?
Will Rocky ever learn, Gertrude? Tune in tomorrow to another Jif-Foam Slice of Life.
Let's tell all the mothers about a new dessert for the family. Nestle's ready-to-serve puddings. Jojo, you may serve the chocolate. Oh, that's very good.
Nestle.
And we all know that Nestle's makes the very best chocolate. Somebody serve the vanilla and the butterscotch and the lemon. Yes, that's very good. Now we'll all taste. Oh. The proof is in the pudding.
If you love me, Grandma, you'll give me curly hair.
Oh, there's your curly hair.
I thought you said your fingers were getting old.
Oh, that's just when my arthritis kicks up. And then my fingers feel stiff. Well, Julie, that's where my friend Anacin comes in. It's wonderful the way it helps relieve my pain for hours.
How do I look?
Anacin tablets have more of the pain reliever doctors prescribe most. For minor arthritis pain, for more freedom of movement without pain, Anacin.
This wire head shows why some colds need a special kind of relief. These are the pressure points in the critical area of colds infection, your sinuses. When a cold centers here, it needs the specialized medication for sinus colds, Dristan decongestant tablets. In minutes, Dristan goes to all 8 sinuses, helps drain them, relieves congestion, restores free breathing. Try Dristan tablets, the specialized medication for sinus colds.
2 Baltimore County legislators have introduced a bill to outlaw even subtle forms of racial discrimination in real estate practices. The bill submitted by delegates Paul Alpert and Richard Rhine would bar the use of mass solicitation by mail, telephone, or door-to-door to push properties onto the housing market. The tactics described in the bill are better known as blockbusting. And here to describe the practices and their effects in the first of a 5-part series is investigative reporter Christopher Gall.
This is a look at one Baltimore neighborhood, part of the Montebello section. It is no longer really a changing neighborhood, it is a changed neighborhood. But like so many other Baltimore communities, the change has not been natural. It has been forced. Forced from white to black and gradual deterioration by the federal government, the city, and the state's long neglect of open housing. It has been forced by the neglect of the established financial institutions, which saw black people as poor risks. And ultimately, it has been forced by real estate speculators who saw a quick profit in the structure of human fear and ignorance. The white families who fled suffered in giving up their homes cheaply. The black families who replaced them frequently became the victims of a polished sales talk, the promise of their own home and a better life. But at a cost they probably can't afford, and one which will drive them to the loan sharks or force them back into the inner city. Vincent Quayle is a Jesuit theology student at Woodstock College. He is one of the more active people in the Montebello area who, through the local Protestant and Catholic churches, are trying to fight the climate of fear and exploitation. And he talked about that climate.
For example, 3 years ago, this area where I'm working in was all white. Today, it's 98% black. The only white families who are still around are really elderly people who are unable to move out. They just can't afford to move out.
Was this a natural transition?
I thought it was. Until, well, when I first learned that it changed within 3 years from white to black, I said to myself, something's wrong. You know, neighborhoods, 100% of the people don't move out of houses unless some forces are working there to drive them out. So I did some investigation of real estate books and tax assessment books down at City Hall. And what I really learned is that because of 1, 2, 3 speculators, this neighborhood changed within that 3-year period. These men, in other words, changed it. They went in and broke that neighborhood. They scared the whites into leaving, and they directed the blacks to this 3-block area.
Just how did they do it? Did you find out?
Yeah. This is a pattern that happens all over, okay? The first thing they do is they plant a couple of black families on a block, all right? They send in their agents then, their real estate agents, to shake up the white community. As the black community moves out of the ghetto area, the white community begins to get nervous. Especially, they wait until the black community is about 2 blocks away, and then they begin to panic. Now, what's characteristic of this neighborhood is the fear, and that's why the exploiter or the speculator can come in and take advantage of this fear. They do it by sending their agents up and down the streets and saying, the niggers are coming, you know what's going to happen to the neighborhood. Sell out now and I'll get you a good price for your home. If you wait 6 months, I won't be able to get you half of what I can get you now. So
It's
the whites,
blockbusting.
right. Now, the neighborhood, the white neighborhood isn't organized. People live together geographically, but it's not a community. It's not a real neighborhood, you know, what we think a neighborhood should be. And that's why, because it's not organized, there's no way to fight this, to fight the fear or the exploitation. So the families, the individual families are on their own, and they sit over the dining room table and say, we better get out of here.
Most of the white families in the neighborhood made their decisions just that way, but they were helped. Tomorrow, a closer look at how both the white and black families are hurt in a frank interview with a white woman who continues to live in a predominantly Negro block, and in the same interview, comments from her black neighbor. This is Christopher Gall.
City Housing Commissioner Robert Embry has hailed attempts by Baltimore Delegate Walter Orlensky and Councilman Emerson Julian to force a reconsideration of the sale of Baltimore's Friendship Airport.
State exploitation, and he talked about the practices in that section on this program yesterday. In his efforts to achieve neighborhood stability, the Jesuit student visited many of the area's black and white families. I went with him to see Mrs. Rose Mason, a white woman who has lived at 1623 East 31st Street for the past 10 years. Her black neighbor, Mrs. Angie Washington, has lived there for 2 years. Mrs. Mason was frank in discussing her feelings about the change in the neighborhood.
It started with the house next door. And I guess because the colored people were coming up through this way, the people began to get scared, so naturally she sold next door. Well, you know, when one sells, boy, the others are right behind, just to go.
Yeah.
Was there any attempt to make these people scared, the white families who were living here?
Well, I had an experience. You want to hear it?
Yes.
Well, I happened to be sitting on the steps with a friend of mine, and the man that had gotten the house from the woman next door, he came up and he said to me, would you like to sell? And I said, no, I couldn't afford to sell because I can't afford to go anywhere else. And he said, you won't sell? I said, no. He says, well, pardon me, Angie, these are not my words. He said, what are you going to do when these niggers move in here? And they get out in the porch in the summer and they drink beer. I said, hell, I'm going to join them. And I do, right?
Yeah.
You're darn right. Because we're very friendly. People are people, I don't care what color they are.
Yeah.
And that's the way I find people, and that's the way I take people, and I hope they take me the same way. The neighbors are nice. I've been approached by many, many realtors. In fact, Mr. Foyt was one.
Oh, yeah.
And he came up here and he said, hello, I came to see you last year. He said, you told me I could come back and talk to you again. I looked at him, I said, I've never seen you before. And I hadn't.
Is that right? Yeah.
That's right. I never had seen him before. So I don't know who he thought he was talking to. But the neighbors up in here are very nice.
Yeah.
I can't complain. Of course, you have trouble with the children occasionally, but I've had kids of my own.
Kids, sure.
So kids are kids no matter whose they are.
Were the other white families who moved out approached in the same way you were? Were they scared, do you think,
Oh, yes.
by the realtors?
by the realtors. Quite a few of them were scared, but there were quite a few elderly people on the block. Now, some of them were ill. A few families, the husband was ill or the wife was ill, and they had to get them out and get them into a one-floor apartment. But that was only a few. The rest were actually scared.
Yeah.
And that's why they went. And most all of them had been approached by the realtors.
Yes. Mrs. Washington, how much are you paying for your house?
$11,950.
$11,950. How long have you been in the neighborhood now?
It'll be 2 years in April.
2 years.
How much did you pay by the week, Mrs. Washington?
Yes.
How much do you pay?
$31.
$31 a week, and that probably includes your ground rent and everything else.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Would you feel happier if the neighborhood were more mixed, if there were a more even ratio of white people and black people instead of the whole neighborhood becoming gradually all black?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it really doesn't matter what, who the people are, as long as they try to, keep the neighborhood up. So I couldn't care who lives here, as long as they don't try to take it down any further than it is.
What happens to you if you're late in your payments at all, or, if you don't make your weekly payments right on time?
Well, we get a court order.
How long does that take to get a court order?
Well, we have our payments are due on Saturday if they're not there by Monday. And by Tuesday around 12 or 1, we get a court notice.
A court, and then what do you have to do with that?
Well, we usually always go ahead and pay them, but you have to pay $2 for it, the court order.
But every week. Are you convinced that you really are buying your house?
No, not really.
You were told, though, that you were going to be buying your house.
Yeah.
How long do you think it'll be before you own the house?
Well, they said, I think it's a 15-year mortgage.
Yeah.
Apparently, but like I said, I haven't seen anything to say that, how much we've, paid into it,
Paid off the principal, right?
Because they said they would send us a statement each year. I think after the first year. Well, this year will be the second year, and I haven't received anything yet.
Yeah.
Do you think you're getting a good deal?
Well, no, at this time I don't think so. At that time I might have thought I was, but at this time I don't really think so. Because I have talked to other people, and I've seen a lot of houses that might have been a lot, nicer than the one that we have. And their prices weren't quite as high, and they're not paying the way we are,
Mrs. Washington once thought she was buying on a 15-year mortgage. She isn't. She has a land lease option for which she and her husband paid $300. Mrs. Washington is not buying, she's renting. And she can lose her $300 she thought was a down payment for any small violation written into the lease. Mrs. Washington isn't alone in thinking she may be buying a house. Many of her neighbors, the victims of fast-talking salesmen, don't realize they're really renting. Tomorrow, comments from more neighbors and a closer look at the buying and selling tactics of the biggest realtor in the city who operates in that area. This is Christopher Gall.
Thank you, Chris. John Kennelly takes off after.
Wash so clean, it's spotless. Drive eats grass, egg, even bloodstains. But not fabrics or colors. Hungry Drive with Enzolve, the professional stain remover, can get your whole wash so clean it's spotless. Because the Hungry detergent eats stains. Buy new Drive.
Christopher Gall now returns to the Montebello section of Baltimore as he continues his investigation of the effects of blockbusting.
As the black community moved closer to Montebello, many of the white residents became uneasy. Some sold out then, others waited. But then black families began moving in, and some real estate agents used the move to further frighten the remaining whites, suggesting their property values might drop because the neighborhood was going black. Then, under pressure, the exodus began. Houses in a 3-block area of East 31st Street, valued by the city at $8,400 to $9,400, were gobbled up by real estate speculators for much less. Most of the houses in these blocks were bought by companies headed by Morris Goldsecker, the largest realtor in the city and one who concentrates in Negro housing. These are some examples of the pattern of buying and selling in this neighborhood. 1801 East 31st Street, valued at $10,000. Bought by Goldsecker from a white family for $5,700. sold to a black family for $12,000. 1811 East 31st Street, valued at $8,400, bought by Goldsecker for $5,700, sold to a black family for $12,000. 1710 East 31st, valued at $8,400, bought from a white family by a Lewis Singer Real Estate Company for $4,800, sold to a black family for $11,000. The pattern is the same for almost each house. Many families aren't really buying, although some think they are. They've bought lease options for $300, which they thought were down payments. Most families pay by the week in this neighborhood now, anywhere from $30 to $32 a week. Wayne Harp is a veteran. He and his family are among the very few who have a standard mortgage from a mortgage company and pay by the month, but he almost rented from Goldsecker. Vincent Quayle, a Jesuit theology student working in the neighborhood, was with me when Mr. Harp described his near miss.
First, you go down to his office. They'll let you read them. Now, they ain't gonna pull them fast on you like that.
Yeah,
So-
except when you read them. I read them, you know. I've had
Right.
25 years of education, and I don't know what they say when I read them.
Now, but I tell you, a layman like myself and most other people that rent or buy from Goldsecker, no, you can't understand it. No, no. But what the one that I signed was a lease, saying. But all the same time, you are told that you're buying. You are being misled, and you are told that you're buying this property.
You thought that the money you were spending in rent was really going into the house to buy it?
Most definitely. Well, this is the way. This is the atmosphere that they put you in.
So you have the white people suffer, the black people suffer.
Definitely.
The only one who profits from it is who? Is the speculator.
Most definitely, it's the man calling the shots, the realtor, of course.
Mrs. Marie McLaughlin, married with 2 children. Hers was the first black family on the block. She saw the frightened exodus.
I had hoped that there would be a lot of them to stay or some more moving in, but we never saw any moving in. They were all moving out, and naturally we felt that the neighborhood would sooner or later go down because they were breaking their houses up into apartments, and then that gave the ones that couldn't afford to buy homes to get apartments in the neighborhood. The prices would soon drop back down, and it would soon go back to the same thing we had just moved from.
Real estate speculators active in the Montebello section have declined an invitation to discuss the situation publicly because they feel involvement in this sensitive area would damage the image of the real estate industry. But I'll try to explain their point of view tomorrow anyway. This is Christopher Gall.
Thank you, Chris. Governor Mandel has appointed David Fisher to With that story, Wiley Daniels.
That proposal was advanced earlier this week by Housing Commissioner Robert Embry as a tool in the fight against housing code abuse. In announcing the idea, Mr. Embry indicated that violations were high in multiple dwelling properties and that he expected some opposition from property owners. However, the Property Owners Association of Baltimore has issued a statement applauding the proposal. I talked to Executive Secretary of the association, Alan Rothenberg.
Well, we agree that licenses ought to be withheld for multiple dwellings that contain housing code violations, which are serious threats to health or safety of the occupants, and provided that the owner has had an opportunity to rectify the situation.
And will the association lobby actively to support the Embry proposal?
Well, as we understand the law, there won't be any lobbying necessary. I believe that the existing legislation gives their department that power now.
But you will support him in efforts to enforce the existing provisions?
Yes, we will.
Do you feel that this proposal will help to eliminate abuses of poor families on the part of real estate speculators, exploitation of
poor families on the part of real estate speculators?
Well, it'll certainly provide for better housing code enforcement. Whether it will affect any of the practices which you're alluding to, I don't know.
Mr. Rothenberg said the Property Owners Association also supports the efforts of Housing Commissioner Embry to increase the number of building inspectors in Baltimore City.
Questionable real estate practices in Baltimore's changing neighborhoods continue to be the subject of a 5-part report by investigative reporter Christopher Gall. Tonight, Chris looks at another side of the picture.
Realtors active in the Montebello neighborhood have declined to publicly discuss what's happening in that section, but their point of view is no secret. They maintain with some justification that the ghetto and all its many problems is not their creation. Lack of governmental action and ingrained white prejudice are the real villains in that scene. The realtors say then that given these conditions, they at least are providing better housing for Negroes when they sell homes outside the ghetto. Because they believe most Negroes to be poor financial risks, realtors devise buying and selling techniques that will give Negroes the long-term opportunity to buy, while at the same time protecting themselves. For example, the land installment contract. But then there are some other methods, more questionable methods, such as a document known as a lease option contract, an instrument signed by many black families moving into a neighborhood who believe that by paying the $300 for the option, they are really buying the house. They're not. They're just renting. At the end of the year's lease, they can exercise the option to buy the house for the full purchase price. But few Negro families are aware of the mechanics, and fewer still have the money to pay that purchase price. Otherwise, they would have dealt with a regular mortgage company in the first place. Morris Goldsecker, the city's largest realtor, uses this option lease. Through the Afro-American newspaper, his companies solicit black families to rent houses in many sections of town, often in changing neighborhoods like Montebello. A former Goldsecker employee told me that families interested in renting are then offered a chance to buy for just a few more dollars a week. Up pops the lease option, out comes the $300, and the trap is sprung. Goldsecker's name is even being used now in many public forums on changing neighborhoods by people like Vincent Quayle, a Jesuit theology student who has been very active in the Montebello section.
Morris Goldsecker is the one who has been really regulating the exodus of the black community out of the center of the city of Baltimore for the past 35 years, wherever he is. Morris Goldsecker.
What has happened in Montebello has happened in other Baltimore neighborhoods, wherever greedy real estate speculators are at work, and the pattern of fear, harassment, and exploitation is spreading. It's not being stopped despite new open housing legislation and despite anti-blockbusting laws. The laws are not being enforced. In fact, there seems to be official reluctance to curb illegal or immoral real estate practices. I'll take a look at what's not being done and what could be done in the conclusion of this series tomorrow. This is Christopher Gall.
Thank you, Chris. Baltimore Delegate Gerald Curran has proposed the creation of a state urban industrial and Tonight, investigative reporter Christopher Gall concludes his 5-part series examining the problems of blockbusting in Baltimore.
There is growing public concern these days about the way Baltimore neighborhoods are changing, but there seems to be all too little concern from city officials who could do something about it, with some exceptions, like Robert Embry, Baltimore's housing commissioner. So far, no public expression of concern has come from Baltimore realtors, represented by the Property Owners Association. The group's executive secretary, Alan Rothenberg, commented somewhat reluctantly on blockbusting practices in the city after Mr. Embry talked about what his agency might be able to do to prevent it.
Well, we have a new program that has just begun whereby we're sending community organizers, inspectors, we're asking the planning department to send in planners to work with the neighborhood so that we can enforce the laws to begin with that exist that prevent a neighborhood from going downhill. And then we can work with the neighborhood to create strong community ties and community pride and plan as to what they might need to prevent problems from arising, such as new streets, lights, planning, recreation area, things of that kind.
Mr. Embry, do you believe that people in the real estate business are exploiting these neighborhoods, for example, in the Montebello section and many other sections?
I'm convinced of it. I was a city councilman from one of the areas that's undergoing such change, and one of the motivations for running for the city council were the distressing and sad tales that came to my attention of cases just like that. I think it's one of the most difficult problems the city faces.
Well, we're not today prepared to make a statement on that position, on that question.
When do you think you could be prepared to make a statement?
Well, we'd certainly have to have a thorough investigation into the allegations that have been made and review the matter in depth.
What has been the association's stand in the past when there have been allegations of blockbusting?
Well, there are existing pieces of legislation on the books which do outlaw blockbusting, and we certainly believe that those laws ought to be enforced.
It's easy to say the laws ought to be enforced, but are they being enforced? As a result of my research into the problem, I think the answer is no. The real estate industry is becoming increasingly sensitive about its public image, as it should, but has yet to make really aggressive moves to put its house in order. The state's attorney's office seems to be virtually ignoring the problem, probably hoping the real estate board will do its own policing. The end result is that nothing effective is being done to stop illegal blockbusting and the questionable sales and rental practices of some realtors. Blockbusting begins in fear and ends in exploitation. White and black people suffer equally, and the total effect throws a jagged stumbling block in the path of intelligent integration of neighborhoods and the very future of this city. Perhaps an aroused public can make itself heard. It's people who are being hurt, so it must be people who respond. This is Christopher Gall.
Thank you very much, Chris. And that